What's up guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits, and inside this week's Lightroom tutorial we're going to be taking a look at editing some portraits together. So sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, download these free raw files at signatureedits.com/free raw files, and we'll be able to get started creating something awesome together. Alright, so I've got my photos here. I'm going to reset them all so they are completely blank. Good. Looking good. Okay, so we've got our blank photos. We're going to go through them together. If you want to download them, head to signatureedits.com/free raw photos or free raw files. And once you're there, you'll be able to edit along with me. So grab those and let's just get started together. Now, of course, I could come in here and just grab some natural presets from one of our preset packs, and that'll give us a nice head start, or I can just do this from scratch. So let's talk about doing it from scratch. If you want to grab some free presets, head to the link in the description below. All right. Enough said, let's start by just adjusting things. So I'm going to start by warming things up, and it looks a little pink because of all of the reflections, probably from both golden hour and the branchery she's got going on. So I'm just going to make it a little bit more green. Then I'm going to head down here, add a little bit of contrast, and pull back the highlights. And this particular file is actually a DNG photo, and you can see it was taken with ISO 800. So we're going to have some issues with noise and stuff like that, and it's a very high dynamic range photo, so we're going to want to maximize what we're working with by pulling the whites down, blacks up. So right now it looks really kind of HDR-esque. Let's reset. So that's before, here's after. Maybe I went a little bit too green. Next thing I'm going to do is head down to the tone curve, and that's where I'm going to really start to add the contrast back in here. So we're going to just drop the midtones a bit, raise the highlights, drop the shadows, and then we're going to dial it in from here. So again, if the tone curve is intimidating to you, you can go ahead, check out my full tone curve tutorial elsewhere on the channel. Somewhere around there, it looks pretty good. Now, because this is a DNG file, it's just feeling a little bit funny and blown out in the highlights. You can see if I press the J key, it'll show me whether or not I've got things totally blown out. Looks like I don't, but it just feels like it's blown out in her hair here. So I'm going to try and save the highlights by taking the whites, pulling them back down a little bit, and taking the highlights, pulling them down a little bit. Somewhere like that. And then I'm going to take kind of a spot here between the midtones and the highlights. I'm going to raise that up. So hopefully I can still have some contrast while not blowing out this section of her hair. Okay, so here's before, here's after. Now there's a million different ways we could take this. We could go down to our HSL panel. We could do something super kind of focused and stylistic and remove all the color except for the main colors, which is going to be the oranges and the reds in this photo. Here's before, here's after. I often find that taking the yellows and the greens down in saturation does make for a better final product. That's just me. And we could go to our calibration and play there too. So we could take it, maybe we want to make those reds pop a little bit more. And then take some saturation down out of our green channel. And take our blues, just mess around with that hue a bit. Okay, so here's before, here's after. If you want to make it more filmy, well, we can go back to our tone curve here. Take our black point and just pull that up a little bit. Take our white point, pull that down a little bit. And you kind of get that nice creamy highlight as opposed to a full bright white highlight. Right? And same with the blacks. So I'm going to move on. Hopefully that gives you some ideas. So when you're editing these yourself, do me a favor, tag me at Signature Edits Co. so I can actually see your edits. I'm really curious about the creative work you come up with, because oftentimes it's going to be better than what I see, or at least different. We all see things differently, and that's really cool. All right, so this photo, you can tell it was well lit, well shot, because literally you adjust the white balance, and to me this is like, it's beautiful. It's ready to go. Obviously there's a million things we could do here. I'm kind of liking the cooler tones that it originally had, so I'm going to back off on the white balance there, adding just a bit of contrast. And maybe we'll pull the highlights back a little bit. Okay, I'm going to grab a radial filter. And I'm thinking I want to add a little bit more focus to our subject. So I'll press O so I can show and hide my mask. And I inverted the mask by hitting the apostrophe key on my keyboard. Okay, now I can take our exposure down elsewhere in the photo and really focus in on our subject like that. So here's before and here's after. Really just to add some focus onto our subject. And we are darkening her head down. We're bringing the exposure down on her face area as well by accident here. So I'm just going to switch to the brush mode of the radial filter. Hold down Alt, and that'll toggle to the eraser. And then I'm just going to erase that effect off of our subject so that we're not darkening her. So, before, after. Cool. Now if we want, let's go down to our color grading panel and we'll play around here with our shadows. And we'll just really enhance that cool tone that's in there. So we'll take it kind of towards a purpley violet. And then in our highlights, we'll try warming those up. So we're just going to do opposite colors. Good. And midtones, I don't know. I mean, we could roll with more purpley blue, or we could hang up there with more of an orangey red. Just depends what you're feeling. I'm thinking that's pretty good. So here's before and after color. So we just added a little bit more of a stylistic effect. You can dial that in however you see fit. All right, so I'm thinking that's pretty good. We're going to move on. Here is a sweet photo of a dirt biker. Now this was taken, looks like noonday sun, super harsh lighting. Let's see what we can do here. We're going to start with just adding some dehaze and see what happens. Sometimes dehaze is like the best thing in the world. Other times it looks awful. I'm going to take it up to around there. That's what I can get away with. And now our white balance looks pretty darn cold. So I'm going to warm it up. We're going to go with kind of like a grungy apocalyptic vibe. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. May or may not be able to pull it off. Or maybe more of a filmy vibe. So to do that, let's start with a filmy sort of style. I'm going to take our clarity up a little bit. Mess around here. See what feels right. Something like that. Then I'm going to go down to my tone curve, and if we're going for filmy, to me that's going to be clipping the blacks and clipping the whites. So we're going to we're going to drag our black point up like this, and we're going to do the same with the whites. So the way I'm doing that, I click once to add a point on the tone curve, then I double click on the point I want to delete, and then I can grab this flat line and just move it where it needs to go to make it feel more filmesque. So we're going to push it really hard in this particular example. I'm going to go down to my HSL. I'm going to get rid of the blues from here. The greens. Okay. So if we want like a really intense sort of edit, we could do something like that. Kind of cool, kind of different. Now let's say we want to make it a little bit more natural. Well, we'd go back into our HSL and add a little more color to it. This is obviously looking very extreme, so we're going to back off on the contrast here. Just depends what you're going for. There's a million different things that we could do here. If you want to do more of a natural edit, let's just see if we can save it really quick. Warm it up. Add some dehaze, a little bit of clarity, a little texture. Now because the original photo is so low in contrast, we're going to add a lot of contrast back into it. And I'm going to try just grabbing a local adjustment brush here, painting it on Mr. Biker Man. We're going to see if we can add a little bit more pop to this image by just focusing in on him. So I'm going to brighten him up. Turn on our range mask. Press O to see what I'm doing. So there's the mask right now. Take our range and dial it in towards the shadows because he's wearing black and his bike is darker than the rest of the background. And you can see we kind of masked him out pretty nicely. Press O again to hide that. And then we're going to brighten him up. Why am I doing this? So then I can take the background and the overall exposure of the image and turn it down. And I'm even going to grab my contrast on Mr. Biker Man and pull that back. So then I can add more contrast to the overall scene. Right, so this again, not a perfect edit, not a perfect photo, just a different direction you could take it. So show me whatever you come up with. Tag me at Signature Edits Co. I would love to see it. Let's move on. Okay, this shot, again, you can see when a shot was taken with really beautiful, gorgeous, overcast, soft lighting. It's so easy to edit. We just grab our contrast slider and it's like, oh, okay, that's done. That looks beautiful. It's perfect. Don't have to do much. So I'm probably going to leave this one and just see what you come up with because there's 100 million different things you could do playing with our different colors. Get really creative and you could get rid of absolutely everything except for a certain color. You can play with your color grading panel to enhance it. So let's maybe do some red shadows. Just do something super different. I don't know. See what feels cool to you. Sure, that's what we got. Here's before, here's after. I don't know. Surprise me. Tag me at Signature Edits Co. Show me what you come up with. I'm really curious. All right, here's another one. We got some pretty decent lighting here. Not as good as the other photo. You can see it's still pretty harsh on her face. But I'm going to start. Grab a radial filter, drag it onto her. We'll reset this. Invert it with the apostrophe key. By the way, if I'm going too fast, you can just hit Shift and then the comma key on your keyboard, and that will slow down YouTube playback. So I'm going to take my exposure down, hit the brush and hit O, and then I'm just going to brush a little bit more on these other areas and hold Alt to erase it off of our subject. I'm not being super fussy because I'm going to dial this back so it's not as obvious. But for some reason it's really showing up. Okay, so that's some progress. Here's before, here's after. We're just adding some focus onto our subject. If you're doing this, do a better job than I have with the mask. It kind of really bugs me when you see a photo and it looks so good, but the mask is just too obvious. That's an issue. Don't do that. Don't be me. Be better than me. Okay, now because we have such harsh lighting on her face, one thing I like to do, brush onto the subject's face, just take the contrast down. Take the highlights down, maybe shadows up a little bit. It'll just smooth things out a lot before, after. Darken things down here, and then let's go to our color grading, see what we can come up with. We'll just go with a nice warm channel. Let's do like a sunset-y vibe. I don't know. What color is the sun today? Somewhere around there. Okay, so here's before, after, before, after. Sky's the limit. You do you. Figure out what works. One thing, I'm going to take the saturation out of the greens. And the blues. Just take the contrast down in the back of the image. Okay, so that's an edit. Hopefully you can create it even better. All right, this is a nice portrait. We've got really nice lighting. It was taken at a bright point of the day, not as soft as some of our other images, but because it was taken in the shade, you can see we don't have any harsh shadows going on. So if you are shooting in the middle of the day or just at a not perfect time, find some shade and life is going to be so much better for you. So as you can see, I grabbed my contrast. It sort of doesn't look that good, so I'm going to selectively add contrast to this image instead of just doing it over everything. I'm going to start with her hair because her hair is awesome and we want to bring out the detail in that. I'm going to grab my add texture brush, just apply that. I'm actually going to increase the intensity of that, like so. Fun fact, if you have a brush, you can hit this little arrow and then it will toggle it, the amount up and down. So then instead of having to adjust individual sliders in this entire brush, I can just do that. Fun trick. Okay, so I've got that. If you want to, you can copy this brush or you can grab it by purchasing any of the Signature Edits presets. It comes with all of these brushes. So we did that. Now let's add a little bit of exposure. Make a new brush, and we're just going to brighten up her face by taking the contrast down, the highlights up a little bit. And then when you have a close portrait like this, sometimes I find it's really nice. She has perfect skin, but if you have issues with skin, if you take the clarity down on the entire face, and then we go back in with another brush and we just add a little bit of sharpness and clarity to the areas we want to add that detail, it will soften the skin, and then we add the clarity and the sharpness back by just adding a little texture and clarity to the teeth, to the eyes, to the eyebrows, that kind of thing. Right? So here's before, here's after. And of course, your eye is drawn to the brightest part of the image, so in this particular case, I'm just going to brighten up the center of this photo by making everything else a little bit darker. I like the bright and airy feel. I just want to make sure that the subject is nice and bright in the frame. I'm going to grab my brush and just erase that mask off of her arm. Okay. Good. Press O to see what you're doing. Then I'm going to increase my exposure overall, somewhere around there. Maybe add just a touch of contrast. I'm not digging it. We'll take our shadows up. Too much, Ryan. Somewhere around there. I'm pretty happy with that. We could, of course, bring out a little bit more pop in her shirt. Enhance little details like that makes a big difference. So I'm going to grab the contrast, just bring it up on that one area. Here's before and after that. Before, after. Cool. And next up, this is a cool shot. Again, it's a DNG, so I don't know if this was originally a JPEG, because this is kind of weird. Almost looks like it's been edited already. But we're going to edit it, see what happens. So obviously, take the exposure up. It looks pretty perfect, but we've already got our edits on here, so let's reset. There we go. So you can see, once you have the image right in camera, editing becomes amazingly easy and creative, because you can almost do whatever you want, simply because the light is so perfect, the pose is so perfect, everything about this shot is just easy to edit. So I'm going to take my shadows up a bit. Now it just comes down to what do you want to do creatively. So let's take a gander here. Grab some split toning effects. Yeah, I love that. Warmth. So if you want to know what that is, let's go to our color grading channel. Basically, it's just added some orange to the shadows and yellows to the highlights. So here's before and after that. Just warmed it up. I like it. I'm feeling it. If it's too much for you, you can dial it back, maybe off the highlights, so it's not affecting her skin so much. We'd increase it in the shadows. Or if you want to, you can do the total opposite. You can make the shadows really cold. Go for that blockbuster movie look. Somewhere around there. And then warm up the highlights again. The world is your oyster. Okay, let's undo that. I'm digging the warmth. And then we're going to make it kind of filmy. Now, I do have some presets here in our film looks pack that actually allow me to just, hello, where are you? Film effects. That allow me to just do this and really quickly make it kind of more filmy. Add some grain, add some vibe, make it feel like it's a vintage lens. Let me show you how you can actually create this just in Lightroom. So, film convert. Literally all that's going on here is we have a nice tone curve, and just like I told you before, you're going to grab the black point, you're going to bring that up and add that nice fade. So that's how you do that. If you want to add different grain, well, obviously that's found down here in the effects panel. You can grab your grain, set it however you like. And then the vintage lens effect, this one's kind of cool. It's actually done in the lens corrections. So we're just going to add some vignetting to the photo and adjust our midpoint. Stuff like that. And that's going to make it feel just a little bit more like a vintage lens. You can also enhance that effect by grabbing your clarity and taking that down. And when you grab your clarity and take it down, you can counter that by adding a little bit of texture, or by going down here to the detail panel and adding some sharpening. It's up to you. So here's before, here's after. World's your oyster. Go nuts. Go nuts for donuts. All right, this photo you can see very overexposed, but we bring our exposure down. Oh man, that's actually a really cool shot. So I love everything going on in this photo except for her skin tone. It just feels off. It feels too green. That's probably because she's in the middle of a green field. All the light is coming off the sun, hitting the grass, reflecting onto her. So there's two things we could do. The first is going to be just adding some magenta, and her skin is going to start to feel better. So if I play with my white balance and get it to around that point, her skin feels more healthy, but you can see that our sky is now completely purple. So let's reset, grab our exposure, take it down to kind of where I want it to be for the background. So somewhere around there. I'm actually going to just edit based around the sky and the grass in the background for starters. So I'm going to do one of those. White balance, not too bad. Now I'm just going to mask out our subject, being super rough. As you can see, I'm going to go to my range mask feature and try the color tool. Drop it on her arm, and it's going to find everything in that kind of color range, which in this case is going to be all of that greenish skin that we're trying to correct. So I'm going to come up here, and then I'm going to make it a little bit cooler, add a whole lot of magenta, increase the highlights, brighten things up a bit. Okay, that might have been too far, but you can see here's before and here's after. It's like from the Hulk to just a normal person who maybe is a little bit burnt. increase my whites. Now, in general, if you're trying to brighten somebody up in a photo, I found if you take the exposure up, it's going to feel weird. If you take the whites and the highlights up, it's going to feel a lot better because it just feels more natural. Okay, so here's before and here's after. We've made some progress. Now, skin tone's still not feeling super great. I could warm this photo up maybe a little bit, and then we could do some more creative work with the grass and with the sky. So let's do the same thing here. I'm just making another adjustment layer. I painted it very roughly. I'm going to go down here to our range mask, go to luminance, actually color. We're going to eyedrop on this green. Now we've masked out our green grass. Perfect. So I want to make the grass just more green. I also want to make it a lot more contrasty. So we're going to grab our highlights, bring those up. Whites, bring those up. Contrast, bring that up. You guessed it. Even the texture, I don't know. We're going to just play around, see what feels right. Now I can only push it so hard before it's going to start feeling weird, but I think we still got a ways to go. Something like that. Take up the saturation. Okay, so here's before, here's after. So we've just added a little bit of pop to it. I'm going to keep messing around, see how far I can get away with, and then dial it back a bit. Before, after. Now I'm going to take a graduated filter and I'm going to brighten up the bottom part of this image. Why am I doing that? Because the top part is very bright because the sky's up there. The bottom part, very dark. So by using a graduated filter, we can kind of blend the exposure so that it kind of matches a little bit more. And it's not such an extreme change. Something like that feels okay. So here's before, here's after. Good. Now, a million other things that could be done. We could go down here to our calibration. Just try and get the skin a little bit more natural. Now, the easiest way to actually make sure your skin tones look good is to have a reference photo in Lightroom. So we could go into our reference mode, go to our grid. Where are you? XY? I think that's it. Nope, that's not it. When you forget how to do it. Whatever. Go into reference mode, grab another photo whose edit you actually like and compare it and see if the skin tones are right. That'll give you a visual aid and it makes it a lot more effective when you're just trying to figure it out. Now we could go and really play with things like that. One more brush and we'll do it on the sky just to enhance what's going on here because the sky's really pretty. Reset. I've got a water sky pop brush. We'll see if that works. Okay, a little intense and it looks like I am definitely affecting my subject. So first I'm going to erase it off of her. Fun little trick for you. If you are using the adjustment brush, make sure you use the Alt or Option key on your keyboard because that little tool is going to toggle between your brush and your eraser and save you so much time compared to going down here and hitting eraser and then hitting brush. And yeah, you get the point. Okay, I'm going to reset that. One thing, if you ever want to add blue to your sky, just lower the white balance. It'll add some blue to your sky. Genius, right? You can add a little bit of contrast, maybe a little dehaze, maybe not, depends. Play around with our white balance a little bit more. So of course this is pretty heavy-handed, not super natural, but I think we've made some progress from here to here. Moving on. Alright, this is definitely a filmy vintage photo if ever I've seen one. I'm just going to use these presets really quick, save us some time, and then we're going to go to our contrast. Let's actually just change. Oh sure, let's try one of our Baja Breeze profiles. Now these are custom Lightroom profiles that come with our preset packs, and what's cool about them is you can actually grab the amount slider, take it up and down just like an Instagram filter. Whereas most presets, they're kind of on or off, and you have to go through and try and tweak them yourself. It doesn't work so well. So that's one way to edit this photo. If you don't have these profiles and you don't feel like buying them, well, let's see if we can make something kind of similar. I'm going to come down here, adjust my white balance a little bit. Okay. Alright, so that's feeling kind of cool. Got a bit of a vintage vibe going on. I'm going to come over to my calibration, take the blue all the way that way, take the green all the way this way, red saturation down, blue saturation up, and we're going to get sort of in the same direction. Before, after. Okay. Moving on, moving on. Okay, this shot's kind of cool. I'm thinking black and white. So you could just hit the V key in Lightroom. That'll switch it to black and white. Personally, I actually like doing my black and whites a little bit differently by grabbing the saturation, taking it out of all of these channels. The reason I do it this way is because then we can add some undertones in our tone curve and in our HSL if we want to that aren't perfectly black and white. So black and white, I like things to be a little bit more grungy. We're going to take our texture up, a little bit of dehaze. What will be kind of interesting in this photo? I don't know. For starters, let's really put the focus on our subject. We're going to brighten him up. Easiest way to do that is going to be lowering the contrast. Raising the exposure sometimes works, and if not, then you raise or lower your highlights instead. So I'm going to raise this up, then I'm going to darken the entire image. I'm using the plus and minus keys on my keyboard to do that. And then I'm going to increase these shadows. This is kind of just winging it, so if it doesn't work, that's why. And sure, let's do a vintage vibe because that's our theme today. So you could literally just grab all the contrast out of this photo by playing around with your white point and your black point. Then you can do some really creative stuff by just sort of tweaking it in the middle. So I'm thinking, cool, make things a little bit more black, a little bit more contrast. Okay, and now, because we haven't actually put it into black and white, we can do some other stuff. So we could play with our white balance, add a little bit of color maybe back into the oranges, just like the slightest bit. So you feel it, but you don't necessarily see it. Oh. So here's black and white, and here's with color black and white. You can also see that we've got major differences in the way that the colors are kind of interpreted by Lightroom. So that's just my thing. Doesn't have to be yours. You can do whatever you want. Play around, see what happens. Here's before, here's after. Now, if you want a really poppy black and white, obviously you're going to go to your tone curve, take those black points down, white points back up, and you have more of a modern black and white feel. All right, next photo. We have a Hawaiian princess. Apologies to anyone who actually knows the culture involved in this photo if I totally got it wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to brighten her up in the photo, and you can see how much of a difference that made. Literally, all we did was this. And I actually think it kind of, I'm vibing it. Now, one thing I am going to do is brighten the steps, because those are kind of the leading lines up to my subject. So I'm going to go in here, increase the contrast. We're just going to raise the whites and the highlights, and then I'm going to paint one line at a time on these steps. It looks like my effect was not strong enough, so we're going to increase a little bit more. Take our texture up. Yeah, okay. A little bit of clarity. Here's before, here's after. And you could do all sorts of things, all sorts of shenanigans, but I'm thinking that actually feels pretty cool. This doorway is actually really awesome as well, so I'm going to enhance the detail on that. Just kind of make it pop a little bit. So we'll take the highlights up, whites up a little bit, dehaze a bit, slight bump in the exposure. Okay, and maybe this pillar too. Oh yeah, that's perfect. He said, not believing it. And our subject is just a little too bright. We want it to still feel natural, so we'll darken her down a little. Okay, before, after. I'm not going to mess with it too much. I actually am finding the longer I edit photos, the more I appreciate just more transparent edits, things that feel a little bit more natural, a little bit more lifelike. This is a photo that I actually took last weekend in Banff. It was great. And the sun came out for about 2 seconds, took this really fast, wasn't really paying much attention, and it actually turned out not too bad. Okay, so what are we going to do with this image? Obviously, just making a few basic adjustments because the lighting was good, the camera that took it was pretty decent, and the settings were okay. It looks good, right? Just adjusting the contrast, that does that. And I'm going to basically bring attention to the elements of the photo that I think are really cool. So we're going to brush onto this water and kind of enhance it. And I'm going to make another brush and brighten up this section just in general because it's a little bit dark. Then add some texture to really bring out the texture of that waterfall and some clarity. Now this part of the photo, very dark, so I'm going to adjust that with a graduated filter. Take the contrast down a bit, bring the whites up, exposure up, blacks up, maybe contrast back up. We'll see. Now one thing we could try maybe is a sun flare off to the side, so let's grab a radial filter, put it right there. And if you want to make your own sun flare, it's really as simple as grabbing your temperature, bring that up, contrast down, texture, clarity, dehaze down, exposure up. And you can see we've got a little fake ball of sun we can move around, add a little zing to our images. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I don't know, it's kind of cool, it's something different. I'm going to keep playing around here so my settings feel a little bit better. Something like that. And then once you've got it the way you like it, you can save that preset and save it as Sunflare Auburn. Perfect. Okay, now one little thing we could do as well, play with our color grading channel. I'm going to warm things up. I like it warm. So I'm going to add some greenish yellow to our shadows, add some warmth to the highlights, and we're going to make it feel a little bit more like a photo taken around sunset. Maybe. If I can pull it off. Something around there. Okay, you might look at this, say it's way too edited. That's fine. You can do whatever you want. Tag me at SignatureEditsCo and show me what you come up with. Can't wait to see it. Alright, one last photo, kind of the same shot. Just a portrait, so I'm not going to take too much time other than just adjusting our exposure here. Typically, I do the same thing. I would just brighten the parts I want to brighten, bring attention to what I want to bring attention to. I'm going to increase the vibrance. And sure, let's just leave it natural like that. And that is our photo. Alright, so hopefully this has been helpful in some way, shape, or form. If not, at least you can download the raw files and create something awesome on your own. So I wish you luck. Please tag me at SignatureEditsCo. And if this was helpful in any way, please do me a favor. Can you hit that like button, leave me a comment below, and let me know if you have any requests for future video tutorials. Alright, I will see you in the next video. Have a great weekend. Create something awesome.